Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of It's My Wrestling Podcast. I'm, of course, as always, your host, Chris Dees. My guest today, man, is somebody I'm so excited to talk to. We've been trying to sort this out for months, but lots of things have got in the way. Really, really happy that we managed to arrange something in the end. He is an NWA legend, as far as I'm concerned, wrestling royalty. The Russian nightmare. He is, of course, the one and only Mr. Nikita Koloff. Nikita, thank you so much for joining me, man. Really happy to have you here.
Well, Chris, it's just an honor to be with you and with all of your viewers, your audience, and I just appreciate you having me on. And you are just a testimony of perseverance, Chris. That's what you are.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Actually, yeah, I got lots of drama, lots of hassle going on in my personal and work life. But like you say, it's how you pick yourself up, isn't it? It's not,
Yeah.
it's
It really is. I mean, look, we're gonna constantly be filled with life is filled with challenges, right? And so then it just is a matter of how do we respond? Do we react? Do we respond? And then how do and so I commend you on just your perseverance in the midst of a chaotic world in which we live, but that's the ones who come out on top and the ones who become world champions, Chris.
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of a chaotic world, like how are things for you at the moment on your side of the world? Is everything sort of back to normal now?
Um, I well, that's a qualitative the word normal, right? It's you got to qualify that, right? I mean, but overall, more than anything, I guess as far as for what I do. I'd say relatively normal in that my schedule, my speaking engagements, I've got coming up, I've got 3 days of autograph signings and in Kentucky and South Carolina. So my schedule's open back up. And so as far as that goes, but what's swirling all around all of us is anything but normal.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the new normal now, isn't it? Nothing's ever going to go back to the way that it used to be. I think we've all just got to sort of adapt now to the way that things are.
Yeah, for sure, and figure that out for each individual has to figure that out for themselves, right?
Yeah.
What does that look like moving forward? What does that look like? I was speaking last Sunday up in Maryland at a church, and I said that I go don't anticipate things being like they were 18 months ago, because they're not. It's like when we had, we got coming up the anniversary of 911 here in America, right? When the Twin Towers, and things changed after 911. I mean, security at the airport changed. Things changed, right? But that's kind of life itself, isn't it? I mean, it's a revolving door, and some people adapt to change better than others, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you say a revolving door there, because before we get started, I wanted to actually ask if you had any memories or any fun stories to share of Bobby Eaton. Obviously, he unfortunately passed away just over a month ago now. It's been a really horrible time. We've lost so many great names just in the last couple of months. Bobby, Paul Orndorff, Daphne as well, really recently. What memories do you have of Bobby? Because I know you wrestled quite a lot, didn't you, together?
I did. I spent a lot of time in dressing rooms and locker rooms with Bobby Eaton, and one of my favorite guys to be around. I mean, it didn't matter. Again, if we just think of even in that world, there's chaos in that world, right? And I mean, and even if you might say the chips were down, I don't know that I ever recall honestly seeing Bobby down. In other words, he always had a great attitude, whether he was approaching a match in the ring or even outside the ring. I saw him many times, post my career at autograph signings and other places, events, or just ran into him in my travels. And he just was always in good spirits and had a great attitude. And man, could he make me laugh? I mean, for me, he might have missed his calling. I think he could have been a comedian, but I used to joke and tease him, Chris. He had a very heavy Southern drawl, right? Being from Huntsville, Alabama. And I used to say, Bobby, I mean, he would talk and I go, Bobby, I can't understand you. Can get the marbles out of your mouth, you know? I'm like, you know, whoa. I mean, like for real, right? And then he'd go, Nikita, you know, he'd slow away. And I go, yeah, why can't you talk like that all the time, Bobby? But all that said, it was all in good fun, but he and I would have a lot of fun with that. But just nothing but fond memories of Bobby Eaton. And you're right, it has been, again, the wrestling community has taken a hit over the last few months.
Yeah, Jody Hamilton as well. Just recently, Jim Crockett about 6 or so months ago. It's been another really tough year.
Del Wilkes, the Patriot. Wilkes.
Yeah, of course. They all seem to happen at once, don't they? It's always within a few months, just everybody goes, and it's really strange. But anyway, right. Thank you for that. First of all, all I've really heard since his passing is stories similar to yours. Just that he was a good guy, really good to be around, a lot of fun, made people laugh. It's lovely to hear these stories. It's just a shame that we have to hear them once somebody passes away. You know, it's just a shame.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is, but on a positive note for your audience, on a positive note, I mean, you know, we realize, we're talking about people passing. I mean, that's a part of life as much as life, being born in life is a part of life. But on a positive note, the fact that we can, whether it's Bobby Eaton or anyone else, that there are some very, enlightening things, some positive things that we're able to say about others. At least we can have those memories and bring those memories out to an audience. So
yeah, absolutely keep that memory alive and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Right, so let's move away from that and bring things to the current day. I want to ask about what you're doing with the Kolov dynasty. Obviously, you guys have had a bit of a setback, like most independent promotions and independent wrestlers did during the pandemic. But how did the Kolov dynasty come about, and how have you enjoyed working with two younger guys in Neil and Alexander?
Yeah, it's been a fun story to build. And it's right. Wrestling's all about storylines in today's world, right? And the ability to tell a story. I mean, it always has been. And so, when they approached me a few years back now, a couple 3 years ago. And they had both already had careers in wrestling out on the independent circuit, but as well as with a number of different organizations, and said, hey, we fell in love with Ivan and Nikita Koloff and the whole Koloff legacy, and would you ever consider us being a part of that story and carrying on the legacy and the Koloff name? And, for those who may not know in your audience, I mean, the Koloff name goes all the way back to the 1930s, actually, before Ivan Koloff, a wrestler by the name of Dan Koloff, and all kinds of history out there on Dan Koloff. And so Dan Koloff in the 1930s, Ivan Koloff, Uncle Ivan Chatoita, right? There's a little taste of the old days. Ivan comes along in the 1960s. Nikita Koloff comes along in the 1980s, and he's born. And so as we considered as I considered the idea of that, and knowing these two guys and they're very polished wrestlers inside the ring, and again, had made a name for themselves, with their own birth names. But I decided, yeah, they're worthy of being christened with the name Koloff and developing Koloff Dynasty, carrying on the legacy. And there was a bit of a setback. Plus Alexander had some surgery on his shoulder, and so that was about a 5-month setback. But he just recently, within the last couple of weeks, had his first match back. I just watched it actually yesterday, and thought it was phenomenal for one of the newer promotions in Atlanta, Georgia. And so both these guys, they've got matches coming up, tag matches, and we'll continue to have some singles. And it's just fun to be a part of it, to be able to mentor them, and you might say kind of manage them, Chris.
Yeah, and that's what I was sort of alluding to. Like, are you enjoying that? So there's still being a part of the business, but obviously from a different side, from a different viewpoint, a different perspective. Because obviously you're not getting physical in the ring anymore. But how is it sort of just like being there, but not trying to not take away from those guys? Because I've spoken to managers in the past, people like Vicky Guerrero, Ricardo Rodriguez, who are larger than life, and obviously you yourself were always a
Yeah.
larger than life character. So how do you sort of separate that so that the crowd aren't really focusing on you and are paying their attention to the guys in the ring?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, I had that conversation last night with Alexander, and you know, and I reemphasized to him, and the same with Neil in the past is my willingness to come alongside them, if you will, or to mentor and or quote manage them is more. In fact, what I said to Alexander was, I'm not looking at launching a second career, and nor am I looking at the emphasis to be on me. From day one, I said, if this will help you guys kind of extend your career and put the bring you even to another level, with who knows, maybe one day with a more major organization, then so be it. But I don't want the focus to be on me. I do want the focus to be on you. And so I said, if we're going to do television tapings and that sort of thing, maybe it's something where I'm a part of the television tapings to be able to bring that credibility to Kolov Dynasty. And then as you're out doing, maybe I'm not necessarily a part of every house show, so that the focus is solely on the two of you. And then maybe for bigger shows, whether it be a pay-per-view or something like that, then I'm a part of that. But also, even if I'm there, it's not something where I'm constantly engaged or involved in the match. I'm at ringside. I'm observing. I might be counseling you from the floor, but all the time the focus and center of attention would be on you guys. That's my plan.
Yeah. And I guess another thing that you having such a long storied career, legendary career, that you can teach these guys isn't just so much about being in the ring, but also the mentality and the longevity and how to survive within the business. Because I think that's something that people forget, don't they? We see so many careers only last 3, 4, 5 years, but these guys have already, as you said, been wrestling for a few as a tag team on the independents, and then you coming in there as well could help to extend. Do you know how I mean? It could help to keep them around in the business for a lot longer because you've got that experience of a long career.
Well, and that's the idea. I mean, both of them each of them has a 12 plus year career already under their belt. And so, yeah, let's just say if it gives them another 4 or 5 years, it's like when I came in and partnered with Ivan. I mean, Ivan was already in his 40s. And the idea of a nephew coming in, partnering with Ivan, was to extend his career a few more years. And so really it's the same approach, although as you said, I'm not actively getting in the ring. But if I could take the success of my own career and help them to catapult that into a few more years, extend their career a few more years, they're not looking at wrestling another 10 or 15 years. I mean, each of them, if they got another, 3, 4, 5 years, they'd be thrilled with that. And then to represent the Koloff name is just for them, just icing on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. No, as you said before, they're really polished, really well rounded. It's good to see more good, strong tag teams come in as well, because obviously the tag scene's pretty much, I wouldn't say died, but it's certainly not what it used to be. So it's beautiful to see, especially for me as a huge tag team wrestling fan. Right, I want to bring things, I was going to say back around, but I sort of want to go back to your early days, right back to the start of your wrestling career. I sound like a bit of a broken record, but another person who we unfortunately lost just under a year ago was obviously Road Warrior Animal. And it was shortly after he passed away. I know you guys were close, you were good friends. Shortly after he passed away, I started sort of like getting into the mood of going back and watching some of his old stuff, some of his old matches, some classic matches. And then did a little bit of research, just a bit of reading up on him, just bits about his career and stuff like that. And I was interested to read that he actually helped you to get into the business. Like, how did that come about? Were you guys friends before you got into the industry? Because I know you had other plans, didn't you? You weren't necessarily wanting to become a wrestler.
Yeah, I didn't grow up dreaming of being a wrestler. I mean, I was aware of it. I mean, growing up, I saw AWA, Vern Gagne, All Star Wrestling on the telly, as I think you guys call it over, right?
Yeah, on the telly, on the old telly.
Yeah. And which, by the way, you may not even know. You may know, Chris, but I have roots in England, right?
No, I didn't know that.
So, little side note, and I'll get back to Animal while I'm thinking of it. So, my mom was born in a little village called Hayden, outside of Carlisle, in England.
Okay, right, yeah.
Up on the Scottish border.
Yeah.
Yep, right on the border of Scotland. And just a few years ago, when she passed at the age of 93, so she lived a full life.
Yeah.
And my sister, brother, and I, my brother-in-law, all took a trip to London, and spent 3-4 days there. Took the train, the rail up to Carlisle, rented a car, and went all over the place, and just researching our history and our ancestry. And so so I have connections to England, so that's why it's always thrilling for me to be able to do these interviews with someone, anyone from the UK. So we got that connection.
Yeah, it's interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Back to Animal, your question with Animal. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing is, I actually recruited him out of Irondale High School, New Brighton, Minnesota, to play college football with me. Like, I literally, when he came to tour the college campus, I gave him and his mom and dad the tour. We had an instant connection. There was just an instant connection there. And he enrolled, he came. So we played a couple years of college football together. And he would eventually, he didn't finish college. He dropped out. I went on to finish my career. And as you alluded to, my passion was football. I mean, American football. I know.
Not soccer. We don't like hearing it called soccer. It makes us very angry hearing it called soccer.
I know. So, by the way, do you have a favorite football team over there?
Yeah, Coventry. So I'm from Coventry, just by Birmingham in the Midlands.
Okay, so don't get mad at me, but Lex Luger and I are both Manchester U fans, so
that's okay. No, that's okay. I don't hate that. I don't hate that. That's fine.
I know people take their football real serious over there,
We do.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's things. We'll stay on point here. So I recruited him out of high school to play college football. He drops out. Next thing I know, he's on TBS. Face painted and mohawk, and he's wrestling and eventually he'd be approached by Don Kernodle, who was Ivan Koloff's partner. They were the NWA World Tag Team Champions, and Don approached him and said, "Hey, we've got an idea for this nephew for Ivan. Do you know any big guys who wouldn't mind shaving their head and becoming a Russian?" And Animal's like, "I know the guy right now," right? So he made the phone call to me. So turnabout's fair play. I called him, recruited him out of high school to play college football. He called me, recruited me out of football to become a professional wrestler.
What was that like for you as somebody who wasn't really a fan of wrestling? What was it like adapting? Because we see so many these days, especially guys come from football, college football, professional football, over to wrestling. There seems to be some sort of almost like a link there, doesn't there? What was it like for you going from one to the other? Was it a big shock, a culture shock?
Yeah, it was. And again, I was somewhat familiar with it. In fact, back in those college days, I'd met Jesse the Body Ventura and got to know him some from his gym. But again, not necessarily ever thinking I would ever entertain the idea of being a pro wrestler. But the day I showed up at Jim Crockett's office, you mentioned Jim Crockett. I mean, the day I showed up there, I had only had a 5-minute conversation with him prior to that day and made sure he understood I had no amateur wrestling background. I had no professional training, none. I know there's a lot of, for whatever reason, everyone thinks I was trained by Eddie Sharkey, but I was not. A lot of the other guys were trained by Eddie Sharkey. I had no training. So the day I walked in his office, he took a look at me. Next thing I know, I'm on a TV set with Ivan and Don Cornotto. And the next thing I know, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina the next night, debuting on television and having my first match when I had never even been in a ring. So yeah, no pressure there. That was a bit of a culture shock.
You mentioned Jim Crockett. I actually wanted to ask about him. Once again, another, as I said at the start, another name that we've unfortunately lost this year. It's been a crazy year. Everybody as fans, especially WWE fans, we have this idea of what Vince McMahon is like in our heads. You go into his office and it's terrifying because he's the guy that has your career in the palm of his hands. But what was Jim Crockett like? Because I'll be honest, I've never really heard much about people's interactions with him. Was he easy to approach? Did you have much of a relationship with him?
I did. In fact, I feel like we had a really great relationship. Obviously he took a chance, he took a risk and giving me a shot at having this career. And so because of that, there was anybody who spends any time around me and knows me long enough knows that, I am, you might even say, loyal to a fault. And by that meaning, sometimes people say, did you ever entertain the idea of going to the WWF? Did they ever try to recruit you to the WWF? The answer is no, they never tried to recruit me. Met Vince McMahon at a gym in Las Vegas one time when we were having he had a match there, we had a match there, same night. We're kind of competing back before the Monday Night Wars. We were competing in actual towns, and but never really had a conversation and never really entertained the idea. Barry Darsow, who was Crusher Khrushchev, who went on to become Demolition Smash. He initially, when he told me he was leaving to go there, asked if I was interested in going and becoming his partner, and I just wasn't, because I had a loyalty to Jim Crockett Jr., who gave me my break. So I probably, no doubt, passed up who knows how many, hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars, by not going to WWF. But I was more interested in staying loyal to the NWA because of the opportunity Jim Crockett gave me. And, Jim was a funny guy, and funny in the sense that he had a very dry sense of humor. And if you didn't know that, you might not know how to really kind of respond to him, or you might say react to him, because he might say little things that you might take offense to, but then realizing because of his dry sense of humor, he was really just joking, but there was a very serious side to him as well. But he believed in me. I feel because I produced, I delivered. He took a chance, I delivered, and then from that, I feel I had a real great favor with Jim and a great relationship with Jim.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you should say that, because I have genuinely always wondered why we never saw you in the WWE or WWF, sorry, at the time. Because your character, let's face it, would have fit in with that era of what WWF were doing perfectly, wouldn't it? We've had loads of larger-than-life, stereotypical evil heels, like the Iron Sheik and people like that, and Volkov and guys like that. So you would have fit in really well, but it's nice to hear about that loyalty, because you hear about that loyalty in places like NWA and the WCW. You don't really hear about that so much, especially these days, with any brand, really. A lot of wrestlers seem to chop and change quite often, don't they? You just don't really get that loyalty anymore.
They do, and I feel we had with the NWA. I feel we had a very unique group of guys. And obviously there's in any business, any sport, in life, there's a clash of personalities. Everyone is not going to get along, but for the most part, looking back, Chris, I just feel like the camaraderie we had, that nucleus of guys we had, from Ricky Steamboat to, even early on, Steve Austin, Mark Callis, before he went to be the Undertaker. I mean, Sting, when he comes, Lex Luger, Flair, the Road Warriors, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, Manny Fernandez, Dr. Death, Steve Williams. I mean, we had a Black Bart, Cowboy Ron Bass. I mean, there was a good nucleus of guys that worked well together, I felt, and worked hard with one another to produce a good product, to give the fans some really great matches. And again, going back to, what it's kind of a what if, right? Well, what if Nikita Koloff had went to New York and had a WrestleMania against Hulk Hogan? I mean, again, it probably would have drew some decent money. I probably would have made a pretty decent payday. Probably would have fit in, but just the interest wasn't there. We had a loyal group of guys in that era that just really enjoyed what we were doing.
Yeah, and that's important. Like you say, money, great, success, great, but if you're happy doing what you're doing, working with the guys that you enjoy working with, and that's more important. I'm the same. I'm the same when it comes to looking for work. I'm not particularly bothered about how much I'm going to earn or if this place can pay me more. I want somewhere where I can be happy, stable, and it sounds like what you had there was stable. You had a lot of really big names around you there, a lot of good names who've gone on to be legends, as you said, Sting, even Steve Austin and The Undertaker, and people are very quick to forget. They think that these guys were just WWE names or WCW names, but you forget that everybody has their roots in somewhere like Smoky Mountain or the NWA. You've worked with a lot of legends, haven't you? A lot of legends that have gone on to have those iconic careers.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate. In a couple more names, another name just came. Ravishing Rick Rude. I mean. Just some of the guys and some of the guys that were on the twilight of their career that I had the opportunity to wrestle with, guys like Black Barry, Barry Windham, another one, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson. Oh my gosh, I mean the names, right? Blackjack Mulligan. In the Mid-Atlantic was a guy named Johnny Weaver, who was legendary, and Dory Funk Jr. I had opportunities to wrestle Dory Funk Jr. I mean, some guys that really go back and had storied careers in the NWA as well as other places, as you mentioned. So I feel very fortunate that I got to get in the ring, Dusty Rhodes. Let's not forget the man of the hour, the tower of power, too sweet to be sour, if you will. Yeah, right. Let's not forget the American Dream. I just feel so fortunate to have had the matches I've had with all these guys. But I want a quick point too, Chris. We live in a world today where whether it's wrestling or sports on any level, we were talking about loyalty, right? I mean, even other sports back in the day, athletes were more loyal to the teams they played with. And of course, something called free agency kind of opened the door, right, for them to jump from one team to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And of course, wrestling was every bit a part of that. And so it is unique in today's world to find someone who just says, I'm just going to, plant my flag here. I'm going to stay here, start here, finish here. And that's even the business world, right? People, like you said, always look into, even change jobs because it's going to be a better payday. But that might not necessarily, as you said, bring more happiness. It may bring more money, but it may not bring more happiness. So kudos to you for, looking for a job that you're going to enjoy as opposed to just, how much money can I make,
Yeah, and even literally just in the last couple of weeks, look at the names that we've seen move away from WWE where we know the money is and head over to AEW, guys like CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, Adam Cole, just literally in the last few days, putting happiness and being with their friends and their families and their partners over being somewhere where they're not necessarily happy. I just want to quickly ask as well, as we were talking about football before, American football, professional football, what hurts more, taking a tackle or taking a bump? I've always wondered.
Oh man, that's a great question. I think I immediately can think back to where I took a helmet on the chin, and it knocked me for a loop. I mean, it knocked me flat on my back, and for a moment I had to, as we would say, shake the cobwebs out, regain my thought and go back to the quarterback and chew him out for what we called hanging me out to dry. And so that's certainly, in fact, I still do have a little scar where it busted my chin open. We call it a hard way in wrestling, right? So I still have a little scar there from the football days. All that to say, there are some times, whether it was a slam on the concrete floor or a move that I wasn't maybe anticipating, that again may have knocked the wind out of me. So I had my share of injuries, never, not major, especially in wrestling, but I had my share of injuries in both. So I might have to say they're about equal.
I was going to sit on the fence. You're not going to give me a proper answer. That's fine.
Well, I'm trying to give you the answer, Chris. I'm trying to give you that. Yeah, I'm gonna sit on the fence and say not one way or the other. Yeah.
So they both suck. They both hurt, basically.
They do. Well, in fact, people say all the time, right? Oh, wrestling's fake. Well, wrestling. I just had this conversation the other day, last weekend. I was speaking at a men's breakfast, and these guys, big wrestling fans, and they're like, I hear the question all the time, so how much of wrestling was entertainment? How much was real? I hear that question all the time. My response is it's 100% entertainment and it's 100% real. Yeah. And they'll just kind of look at me and I'm like, look, if I get hit with a metal chair or I'm in a Russian chain match and ball that chain up, or I wrap it, or somebody wraps it around my neck, or I wrap it around my opponent's neck, you're gonna feel that. If I run into a pole or into a cage, I'm still gonna feel that. So that's real, right? Yeah. But it's entertainment at the same time. So
yeah, good answer. No, that's a good answer. Absolutely. Right. Obviously, we've spoken about NWA loads because you are so synonymous with the promotion. Two-time tag team champion, United States champion, TV champion. You were never the world champion, though, were you? Is that something that you look back on and regret at all?
I don't. I'm one of the few guys. I think there's probably a couple others out there that maybe I'm not aware of or whatever. I'm one of the few guys who not once but twice turned down the world heavyweight title.
Okay.
Yep, and it was actually at a point in time, for those who maybe know the story, and for those who don't, actually I just recently updated my last book, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring and Redemption. I wrote about 7 or 8 new chapters last year, added more pictures. It's got my whole life story in there. Some may be aware of the fact, I had a wife that died of cancer at a very young age. I had actually walked away from wrestling for a couple of years. I mean, on top of the business, right? Main event, walked away to take care of her. And it was not long after her passing that Ric Flair had the book at the time, what they call the Booker. And he had the belt and the book at the time, invited me down to his house in Charlotte, offered me the world heavyweight title. Essentially said that, thank you, but no thank you. I just didn't feel the timing was right. Came back a short time later, offered it to me again, really wanted me to come in and be a spark to the company at the time, and just turned it down a second time. So, and no regrets. I mean, would it have been fun to add that to the resume, right? To say I was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion? Sure, it would have been, but no. You said, do I have any regrets? No regrets.
Yeah, and like you say, it's not like anybody ever thinks, oh, Nikita Koloff, he had a great career, but he wasn't champion. Nobody thinks that. They think that you had a legendary career. That's all that matters.
Well, and you mentioned some of the titles. So, fortunate to, whether it was the 6-man, the World TV, the unification matches, right, between, for the world, for the U.S. belt, the NWA TV belt, and Terry Taylor with the UWF belt. Wahoo McDaniel, again, another legend in wrestling, who I unified. He had the national heavyweight title. I had the U.S. title. the best of 7 series against Magnum TA, right?
Yep.
The first ever Great American Bash, wrestling Flair for the World Heavyweight Belt, even though I didn't win. A lot of people talked about that match. And so, yeah, there were a lot of, I can think back, Chris, on a lot of matches I was a part of, from the Starcades to the Bashes to the War Games that certainly bring back fond memory, aside from never holding the World Heavyweight title.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people have wrestled for 2-3 times as long as you did throughout your career and never held a title. It's not that important. You mentioned a few huge matches, a few huge moments in there, like the Great American Bash and War Games. I actually wanted to talk to you about War Games because, as you say, you were a part of the first War Games, that historic match that we all so fondly remember with the 4 Horsemen. How have you enjoyed seeing War Games still being used moving forward, even to to the modern day? At the moment, it's still being utilized in NXT. I think we're only about a month or 2 away from the next War Games event, if they do it, because I know there's a lot of changes happening with NXT. Do you still enjoy watching those matches, the War Games? Does it bring back fond memories? Do you still think that are they doing the legacy? You know what I mean? Are they holding
justice? Are they doing a legacy justice? Well, I guess my response is typically to these types of questions is this: often imitated, never duplicated. Now, what I mean by that is, it's like when they do a movie series, right? You have the original movie, then they do a sequel, or they do a part 2, 3, 4, 5. It seems like the original of anything, is typically always the best.
Yep.
Not that they can't improve on another one or it get better. But that said, most people talk about that match beyond the original War Games. And even for the guys going into it, we had no idea what to expect, right? It had never been done before. And Dusty, to his credit, the genius behind many of these things, whether it was the Great American Bash, the War Games, or many other things that he gets credit for coming up with the idea of. And I can just reflect back on that night and the electricity in the building, the anticipation of what was going to happen, and then the way the way it unfolded, back and forth, every 2 minutes, a new guy coming in, and that adding a new dynamic to the match as it continued leading up to the final outcome 25, 30 minutes later. And then subsequently, taking it on the road eventually, and then coming back around, being a part of Sting's squadron, right? So even that was fun, being a part of Sting's squadron against the Dangerous Alliance. But at the same time, it still was not the original, but it was still fun. And so I'd say as long as the fans are being entertained by it, I think it's great that the legacy lives on and those types of matches.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's obviously changed a lot over the years. It seems to have, the mentality and the psychology of the match itself, as wrestling's changed over the years and it's become more about those wow moments, War Games these days is more about, it's pretty much a spot fest, isn't it? It's still an enjoyable match, but it's not so much about the wrestling that happens within the ring anymore. It almost feels like the guys in there are trying to one-up each other, like, oh, you did a great spot, now it's my turn, and it's sort of kind of lost a bit of its magic because it's just a spot fest, but within a cage.
Well, and that's a great observation. I think a great observation on your part, in that go back to the original. I mean, the 4 Horsemen against the Superpowers and the Road Warriors, right? With Precious Paul Ellering and James J. Dillon. There was such a story there that I mean, in any one of those, you could spin that off into a single match, a tag match, a 6-man, an 8-man match, and then ultimately the War Games with all 10 guys in the ring, right? but there were so many stories within that one story. And it wasn't, to your point, we weren't trying to, it was a war. It was war games. And so it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't about a series of spots, although there were some high spots in there. It was just more about the story than it was just getting a pop from the fans, right? So
yeah, and it felt very final as well. I think that's an issue that I have with modern day wrestling is you've got this big storyline, this big rivalry. It leads to a Hell in a Cell match or a cage match or whatever it might be, and that should be it. For me, that should put a line under it. That's the end of the feud. But then they'll keep feuding for another month or until the next pay-per-view. Whereas War Games back in your time, it sort of felt like wow, this rivalry is so intense that it's come to a War Games match to really, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that was old school psychology, Chris, was typically anytime a match ended up in the cage, that was what they call the final blow off of that angle. And because you guys were moving on to another story, you were moving on, it was going to turn in a different direction, or you guys are going to go in a different direction. That was old school wrestling, where you eventually built up to that, and that was it. As you're saying, that was it.
How about the women? Because obviously the women have a War Games match every year now as well, don't they? What were your thoughts when they were first announced for that? Because I was surprised. I know WWE like to give us as many first evers as they can. You know, it almost sometimes feels like they're doing it just to say that they've done it. But what were your thoughts and your reaction when the women went into the War Games? They've often put on a better match than the men, to be honest.
Well, and the women's wrestling's come a long, long way, right? I mean, from the days, it was more of for us in those days, it was more of I guess the word I would use, it was more of a novelty.
Yeah.
In that, there was going to be, the novelty was typically in those days was, and it was usually in the summertime when Crockett Promotions, in the summertime when kids were out of school, there was kind of a dip in the attendance. And so that was a way to try to draw in, more fans during that dip in attendance. And so they bring in women and they bring in midgets, right? I mean,
yeah.
Midget wrestling, man, that was another novelty, right? And people, let's go see the midgets, and, let's go watch the ladies wrestle. And so women's wrestling has come a long, long, long way. And so kudos to them for the ability, all the athletic, the athleticism of the women. And again, to your point, the ability to sometimes put on a better match than the men. So all I can say is kudos to the women for all that they're doing as far as, recently NWA Empower, right? They had an all women's pay-per-view recently, right?
Yeah.
So I just might, tip my hat to the ladies for what they've been able to accomplish.
What do you make of NWA at the moment, and how the company is still surviving? I know obviously they've had troubles over the last few years. Billy Corgan has obviously put a lot of money into the company. You've had Nick Aldis with a nearly 3-year-long reign, which was amazing to watch, especially as a fellow Brit. I loved seeing he's only just recently lost the title to Trevor Murdoch. Are you still at all keeping up with the NWA and what they're doing?
Yeah, I do. And again, my hat's off to Billy Corgan. I give him, in fact, I took Kolov Dynasty. They were not yet Kolov Dynasty, but I took him down there for a debut match, and a, potential run with the NWA. And we have to date not really, had any follow up with them, which is fine. I still support Corgan and what he's doing with the NWA. Obviously, again, my loyalty to the NWA. I want to see the brand be successful. Competition's good. When Vince kind of controlled it all, I didn't feel like that was a great thing for wrestling and for wrestling fans. So when AEW, and kudos to Cody and the Khan family and what they're doing, when Jeff Jarrett launched Impact, I mean, I went down and did, about, I think 3, 4, 5 shows for Jeff, just made appearances to help get Impact off the ground way back when. Ring of Honor. So some of these other promotions, I'm thrilled. They may never make it, to star, you might say mega star status, but that's okay. I just want to see competition. So, I'm glad to see Corgan is sticking with it, and I like obviously I'm an old school guy, so I like more of the old school brand. I think Nick Aldis is, in my view, in a sense, a modern day Ric Flair. I love the way he carries himself, his work in the ring. I think personally, I think is impressive. His interviews, I mean, he reminds me a lot of Rick, and even how he dresses, and just all of it, And so yeah, I think it's great. I think with the NWA, Corgan, and all the promotions are doing, I just want to see them all be successful.
Yeah, I'm a big Aldis fan. He, as you say, he carries himself like a champion. He looks like a wrestler. He talks like a wrestler. Looks like a champion. I think he's done a phenomenal job of helping to, I don't know if legitimacy is the right word, but he's helped to make NWA not feel like an indie promotion, if that makes sense. It feels important.
Yeah, and to bring it back, this thing they just did, the Race to the Chase, the legendary chase in St. Louis. I mean, Harley Race and some of the Lou Thez. I mean, some of the guys who wrestled way back when in the chase, the Funks and many others, and Sam Mushnick, and just the history of the NWA. That's one thing I know. I'm already mentioned my last book, but William Murdoch, who co-labored on this book with me. I tell people one thing, if they get a copy of Ring of Redemption, one thing they'll appreciate is William Murdoch's a wrestling historian. So he actually takes wrestling in the book all the way back to the 1800s, where wrestling originated. And so people will really find that part of the story fascinating. If they're a real, a diehard wrestling fan, they're going to love that part of the story. So,
is the book on Amazon? Can people find it?
It's not on Amazon. If they go, in fact, Kolov.net is the kind of a one-stop shop for the website, Kolov.net, and there's a couple books there. A couple books that I've written are available there. There's other things that are there's a number of different things that are available in the store site there. They can learn about other things that I'm doing. Lex Luger and I do a camp, Chris, called Man Camp that we co-facilitate together. We partner up and do a lot of ministry together. They can learn more about Man Camp there. My podcast, I've launched a year ago. I launched a radio show on Truth Radio Network with Stu Epperson, and then it's on all the podcast platforms, just called the Man Up Show. They can link to that right through Kolov.net as well. And here's some great interviews. I did a 2-part with Sting, Jackson Riker, who's on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
Got a great interview with Jackson, with Luger, with Magnum TA. There's some. Just recently did an interview that will come up here down the road with Kevin Sorbo, who was 6-7 years. He was Hercules in the TV series Hercules. So just a lot of great interviews. Brad Johnson, who won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Bucks, and so people will enjoy some of the interviews on the podcast as well.
I'm glad that you mentioned your ministry work there, because that's something that I was really keen to find out about. I think, was it like the early 90s, 92, 93, when you discovered God? And that's always something that's, whenever I hear these sorts of stories, whether it's yourself or another wrestler, no matter who it is, I'm always really interested, really keen to find out how these things come about. Because I'll be honest, completely honest, I'm not the most religious of guys. I go to church occasionally, or at Christmas time, things like that with family, but what was it that helped you to discover God in the first place? Like, was there something that happened? Was it a decision that you made?
Kind of led me to that, and I want to respond to this. When you say I'm not a real religious guy, I love that, because I'm not either.
Oh, okay. Fair
And,
enough.
in fact, I mean, you know, because guys will make comments, oh, you know, I heard Nikita's a real religious guy. Well, and I try to differentiate between there is religion, but then there's a relationship, you know, and no different than someone who has a husband who has a relationship with a wife, or me, you know, who has a relationship with my 4 children and now 9 grandchildren, right?
Wow.
And yeah, I know, and counting. And so for me, it's about relationship. I didn't grow up in church, you know, back in the days of my early days. But I wasn't oblivious to the story either of, you know, the man Jesus who died on a cross and, you know, was crucified. So I knew the story, but I wasn't living for him or pursuing, you know, that path. And it was about 11 months after I left wrestling that I really, Chris, kind of had an aha moment that here I was successful. In fact, I talk about it in one of my other books. I was successful, but I was unfulfilled. You know, I became a world champion. You know, I had this illustrious career in pro wrestling, and yet I just felt like something was still missing. And through other business relations, I met a Christian couple who had invited me to their church. And so October 1993, about 11 months after I walked away from wrestling under my own terms, you know, I found myself at an altar surrendering, you know, my life to the Lord Jesus. And that encounter set me on a whole new trajectory to where I still, you know, wrestling is a platform for me. Many of the churches I'm in, a lot of the ministry I do are all pastors who grew up watching wrestling. And so they're the ones who will bring me in a lot of times. And so it just wrestling actually opened a lot of doors for me. I did not know, Chris, if you'd asked me 35 years ago, would I be a minister, an evangelist? And I would have said, absolutely not. What are you smoking? You know, what are you on? But I look back and I feel incredibly fortunate to now have traveled to 30 different countries, all 50 states. As I mentioned, Lex Luger and I co-facilitate a men's ministry, and I'm grateful. I'm thankful to now be able to do what I do, you know, bring what I like to say a positive message to the world, and wrestling be a platform many times to open that door to be able to tell my story, whether it's in a book or on a podcast or on an interview like this, Chris. So I'm just blown away. My life looking back, I would summarize and say it's just been absolutely surreal would be the appropriate word.
Yeah, religion's a strange one, isn't it? It can often cause more problems than it fixes. It's such a contentious thing. It causes so many issues and wars. You know, we have
Wars, yeah, absolutely. Most of the wars, looking back, if you look back in history, most of the wars originated through religious differences.
Yeah.
You know, a difference of opinion. And so you are right. And that's why I try to emphasize, you know, anytime I'm out and about that, you know, in fact, I say this, like I've ministered around the world. There's all kinds, I don't even know how many different, what they call denominations, right? Whether it's, you know, Anglican, I mean, do you go to an Anglican church, or where do you go when you go?
Over here, so Christian Catholic.
Catholic, right? So, you know, I have Catholic friends. I have one of my best friends, Josh Gillum, is an Anglican priest. But he loves the Lord. He has a personal relationship with the Lord as an Anglican priest. And so, you know, I have friends from all different denominations, but at the root, if you get down to the root of it, it's all relational. I have a relationship with them. We have a relationship with Jesus, and that regardless of what banner we're wearing, whether it says Baptist, Lutheran, Catholic, Anglican, or whatever, at the core, I ask people, Chris, in your heart of hearts, down deep in your heart, is that relationship there? Because that's what really matters, outside of what your particular denomination might believe, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And that's like you say, there's so many differences. If you don't want to believe in something like that, that's fine. That's your call. Don't believe in it, but just let other
yeah,
people. If they want to, just let them. It's none of your business, really, is it? Just let
yeah.
them believe
Well,
it.
and I have those friends. I have friends who want nothing to do with religion and don't want anything to do with a relationship with Jesus. I have those friends too. I have Jewish friends. So I have friends from every walk of life, and at the end of the day, Chris, whatever you want to believe. And by the way, if you don't believe the way I believe, I'm okay with that. If you say, that whole Christian thing, I'm still going to love you. I really am. I'm still going to love you, and I'll still be your friend. You don't have to unfriend me just because you don't believe the way I believe. We can still be friends,
Same with politics as well, isn't it? I think politics is even worse.
Yeah. If you don't believe the way I believe that way, we can still be friends. We really can,
We can be friends. Let's just not talk about it. Just play it safe.
Or if we talk about it, just agree that we disagree. Okay, I don't see it that way. I don't agree with you, but I'm not going to walk away from you and unfriend you because you don't agree with or think the way I think. That's just my approach, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. It's the best way to be. Right, I want to do something a bit different. I've never done this with any guest before. A little segment.
Okay.
I don't even know what to call this segment because I've not really thought about it. I've just sort of come up with it on the spot. I want to just off the top of my head throw a few names at you guys that you've encountered or wrestled with throughout your career, and really
Okay.
just summarize whatever you can about
A quick comment. Yeah,
Yeah.
quick comment.
Yeah, a quick comment on what they were like to be with, if they were cool, what you thought of them, any fun stories, any funny moments that you can remember with them. I'll come up with a name for it later. The first name I have to go for, somebody that you mentioned earlier, somebody that I looked up to, somebody that I was devastated when he passed away, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
I wondered if you could bring Dusty up first. I mean, what a charismatic guy. I mean, from those spontaneous promos that he would cut, the son of a plumber from Austin, Texas, yeah, right? I mean, what a charismatic guy. And we traveled for a couple years together as the Superpowers, him and I driving up and down the roads and just talking about life, loved the guy, became a dear friend. And so certainly I can think about our conversations just about life outside of the ring, and then all the fun matches that we just had, inside the ring, whether it was, again, as a tag team, as a 6-man, as an 8-man in the War Games. I mean, just so many memories that come to mind. But I would just summarize by saying that he was a friend up until the day he passed. And again, Cody, watching Cody grow up from diapers, probably wouldn't like me to say that, but watching Cody growing up in diapers into who he's become now and, following his dad's footsteps, and of course, Dustin and others. Just what a legendary family.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Next name, JJ Dillon, a name that we don't really hear very often. JJ Dillon.
JJ Dillon, brilliant guy. I mean, brilliant guy. And what I remember about JJ, I mean, just always business minded, had a great mind for the business, very creative mind, always about business, carried his persona, as a manager, but even behind the scenes as Dusty's assistant back in my day, he was Dusty's assistant. And I know he went up, in different roles with WWE, WWF. But just one of the as a manager, one of the best of the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so one of my favorite big men of all time, Big Van Vader.
Van Vader, good gracious! My very last match, my last official match against Van Vader, injured me. He had a history of being reckless and not necessarily intentionally hurting guys, but at 450, 500 pounds, he was a big guy. Actually, I got 2 injuries that night. Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Injured my neck. He clotheslined me back of the head. I didn't know he was coming. We were fighting out on the floor, and my left arm went limp for about 3, 4, 5 minutes. Eventually, that came back, but that's what led me to find out. I had some things going on in my neck. Got a hernia that night from picking the big guy up, and body slamming him. Had surgery. And so it wasn't career ending, either one of the injuries, but it led to my decision to walk away. And he did, to his credit, I will say this, to his credit, we're actually doing an autograph signing when WrestleMania one year was in Miami. And he came to me, sought me out, and this is years later, and he said, I've never told you this, but I just want to ask for your forgiveness. I want to apologize for injuring you that night. It wasn't intentional, but I did want to just face to face, ask for your forgiveness and tell you I'm sorry that, that I injured you that night, which I thought was, very, very commendable on his part, showed, so.
Sounds like a good guy. Especially after all those years to still have it sort of hanging over him. I'm not a big fan of the Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Fame. I think it's very, I think it's a PR stunt, but I also think it's crazy that he's not in there.
Well, people ask me all the time about, you should be in there. Ivan should be in there. I think it's crazy Ivan's not in there. I mean, he beat the legendary Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Gardens. Are you kidding me? But most important, on a side note on that, most important to me is Dan Gable's 1972 Olympic gold medalist has a museum up in Waterloo, Iowa, the Dan Gable Museum Hall of Fame. And I was inducted in that one, I think 2006. But that one to me is because it's brick and mortar. People can go visit it. If you're ever in Waterloo, Iowa, go to the Dan Gable Museum. You'll spend an entire day there learning the history of amateur wrestling as well as professional wrestling.
Interesting. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, I would like to go to a Hall of Fame that is actually, like a real Hall of Fame, not just a ceremony. It'd be good to actually learn and look around and see things.
Waterloo, Iowa, Chris. That is, you'll be blown away. And if you're a wrestling fan, put it on your bucket list. Go to Waterloo, Iowa, and tour Dan Gable's museum.
I've been to America once, so next time I go, I'll make sure I go to Iowa.
There you go.
Couple more names. I'm going to go Ricky Steamboat.
One of the best of the best of the best in terms of what in those days they would have called white meat baby face. That would have been the terminology. He was one of the best smooth. I mean, it was a night off wrestling Ricky Steamboat. I don't know that, and I didn't have we were a tag team a few times. Sometimes we wrestled against each other. But I don't know that I ever was in a bad match that Ricky Steamboat was a part of. He was just one of the most consummate, a professional, and cared about every match that he was involved in, or at least that I was involved in with him, and wanted to give the fans the most for their money. And so just at the very top of the list, Ricky Steamboat ranks right up there.
Yeah, and his match against Macho Man Randy Savage at WrestleMania, just one of my favorite matches ever of all time. I was a baby when that happened, but looking back at it now, it's right up there for me. One more name I'm going to go for. I have to ask about the icon Sting.
The Stinger. We are best of friends to this day. We talk all the time. In fact, I think back on certainly on the matches we had against each other. A lot of fans will comment on those matches, especially the chain matches we had against each other, and then later circling back around towards the end of my career, and becoming finishing as a fan favorite and tag teaming with him, and as I mentioned, being a part of Sting's squadron, and nothing but and I, my hat's off to Steve. I mean, just to still be out there and now taking all of his years of experience and knowledge and pouring it into the the younger guys and being able to, if you will, mentor them and help raise their game, similar to what I'm doing with Kolov Dynasty, right? But on a smaller scale, him on a much larger scale. Had the opportunity to really mentor him and his two sons for about a 4 or 5 year period there. 1998, he actually gave his life to the Lord and had an opportunity to mentor him and his sons for a number of years, and even do some ministry together with him. In fact, I used an interview he did. He was a host on a show called TBN for a number of years, and so I have a clip of that interview of when he was interviewing me about my transformation in October of 1993. His was in 1998. Lex Luger's in 2006. And so there's a nucleus of guys, Chris, who realized that all the fame and fortune in the world still, in a sense, can kind of leave you empty, without that relationship. And so I'm thrilled to see what Steve is doing, and what an iconic career, as you mentioned. Unbelievable. Amazing.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that, man. That was fun. I enjoyed that. Like I say, I just need to think of a name for that segment, and I think I'm going to do it more often. Some fun little stories in there that I think that we don't often get to hear. Right, I'm going to end with the same question that I ask all of my guests, but I like to tailor it to them and tailor it to their careers and things that are relevant to them. So I always ask my guest who would be on their Mount Rushmore, but for yourself today, I'd like to, because we always get the same answers, don't we? Everybody says the likes of it's Flair, Undertaker, Hogan. You always pretty much get the same, maybe 1 or 2 slight differences. So for you, I wanted to ask, who would be on your Mount Rushmore of evil, foreign, stereotypical heels? And you can put yourself on there. You are allowed to put yourself on.
Well, I guess, I mean, at one point, in fact, I got a pastor friend of mine, Rick Joyner, who always whenever he introduces me at a conference or, speaking engagement, he's like, I want to introduce a Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff, the most hated guy in the world. And I'm like, Rick, that was in the wrestling world. I mean, I wasn't on a wanted poster, in the post office, right? But at one time, and where he got that was, I was literally voted by the fans, the most hated guy in wrestling. So I suppose you would say, I mean, in that sense, I might be up, my face might be up on that mountain. Abdullah the Butcher comes to mind. Yeah. Abdullah the Butcher, certainly, he was one. Gosh, there's so many. There's just so many good ones, and of course, a lot of the guys kind of flip back and forth, right, between, from one side to the other. So, I'm trying to think of when some of these guys, when they were heels, what would they have qualified? Because. Geez, you have really stretched my imagination here, Chris. So, I mean, Stan Hansen, when he was a pretty aggressive, pretty good villain as well. So Stan Hansen, Abdullah the Butcher, I'll say Nikita Koloff, and I would say Bruiser Brody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a one that probably, people forget that foreign can also mean Canadian. So you've got guys like Roddy Piper as well.
Yeah, and I could have, the Iron Sheik certainly could have went up on that. Yeah, he could have went up on that list as well. But I guess technically Piper would have qualified. Uncle Ivan was a pretty good villain in his day too.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't have left out Uncle Ivan, but all right, Nikita and Ivan and Abdullah the Butcher and Bruiser Brody.
You got Nikolai Volkov. I'd probably put Andre the Giant in there. Maybe Yokozuna, someone like that as well. There's loads. Like you said, you could do 5 different Mount Rushmores. There's so many icons.
Yep, absolutely.
Isn't there? Right. Well, brilliant. Like I said, man, that was my last question. It's been an absolute pleasure. Like I said at the very start, we've been trying to get this sorted for a few months. I'm so glad that you were able to join me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. Before I let you go, where can everybody find you on social media or on YouTube or on anything like that? Any shops? I know you mentioned obviously Koloff.net.
Yes. And again, it's kind of a one-stop shop. I'm trying to make it easy and thank you to you, Chris, for the opportunity to share some of my story. To all of your audience out there, thank you for being, just such loyal wrestling fans. Talk about loyalty. I say it all the time. You guys are the most loyal of any fan in any sport. I feel personally. I mean that sincerely. And so it's really kind of a one-stop shop. If you want to connect with me on Instagram, Twitter, I'm on Facebook. I got somebody that manages that. And so I post things on there, but I'm infrequently on there looking at comments, but who manages it will send me that. But again, go to Kolov.net because you can actually link to me on all social media, find out more about the Man Camp, follow the podcast, go subscribe, download the Man Up podcast. It's all right there on Kolov.net.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure you do that, guys. Kolov.net. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You know where to find me. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just It's My Wrestling Podcast. Again, Nikita, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Honestly, one of my favorite guests. I've been really looking forward to this for ages. All the best with the Kolov dynasty as well, man. I hope you guys continue to find success going forward. Hopefully, we'll see Alexander and Neil. Maybe in you never know. Maybe on TV.
Never know where they will pop up. And Chris, you keep persevering, my friend. Okay, keep persevering. And to all of your audience out there, hey, you better tune in and watch this podcast in the future as well, or the Russian nightmare will come after you. Shatoita.
Perfect. I might make that my trailer. Just threaten people into watching it.
There you go, Chris. Awesome.
Nikita, man, thank you so much. Take care, guys. Everybody, thank you for watching. And until next time, take care.